Our film opening both uses and challenges the typical conventions of the post-apocalyptic genre. Our production company neither uses, challenges, nor develops the typical conventions for a production company of a post-apocalyptic film. After doing some research, we realised that there is no pattern or connection between a production company and the genre of film. Although, after some thought, we decided to make our company fit in with the genre, as it would look silly to have a bright, noisy production company and then a dark, dull film opening. We thought of the name Iron Gate Productions, as we thought it was still creepy and it could look good with a dark background. We chose a bold, plain font because this was a convention for the titles of a post-apocalyptic film and would make the complete opening flow very nicely. The background we made red and black, and we decided it should look almost like blood, as a stereotype of this genre is that it contains a lot of blood and gore.
The vaccine has been distributed to 80% of the world's pharmacies.
So, how many people have been given the vaccine?
Approximately 625,000.
How many people are now immune from the common cold?
Approximately 620,000.
So, what are your aims for the future?
By the end of this year, we aim to give the vaccination to everyone in the world.
We did a lot of research into titles of films. We looked at the font, the timing and the order. I looked into the titles of I Am Legend, The Walking Dead, World War Z and Ender's Game. Once I had researched these, I noticed a common order, so I selected the few titles that applied to the work we did, such as actors, editors, director of photography, music and sound, casting, written by, executive producer, produced by and directed by, and put them in a similar order. We thought this was important for our opening because hopefully it would look more professional, and we think they may be in that order for a specific reason, such as importance. I also looked at the fonts used and found that they were just plain, bold and thick, like in World War Z. The majority of colours used were just plain black and white, like in The Walking Dead. So we decided to follow in their footsteps and use the same type of font, as there was not much room to go wrong, as long as we chose plain bold font. We went on www.dafont.com and looked for our perfect font. We decided on Bebus, and after looking back at our research, we thought white font would look best with the backgrounds that they would be placed on. Also, after watching I Am Legend, we were inspired to place our titles in a similar way to them. They placed their titles along buildings and roads of the run-down areas. Unfortunately, I could not find the titles for I Am Legend, but here are the locations they used. We chose to do this in a few of our establishing shots, as it wasn't possible in all of them. We were glad we chose not to challenge the conventions with our titles, because we realised that this is the main thing in our opening that contributes towards it looking professional. Therefore, we are going to challenge it in different ways, which I will explain a little later on. We also decided to use the conventions of the post-apocalyptic genre with the main title. After looking at films such as The Book of Eli and Ender's Game, we saw that the main titles are also in a similar font as the titles, this being plain and bold again. We decided to use a subcategory font of Bebus, the one we used for our titles, and put our main titles in Bebus New. We thought this was great because it was a different font but still in the same category. Initially, we had decided to call our film Bella because it was short for the Latin word Bellator, meaning survivor and fighter. After giving it some thought, we realised that this title makes people think of a sweet little girl called Bella, and may get the impression that the film is a rom-com or family film, and is not actually the genre that it is. So, we rethought and looked at our research, and we saw that post-apocalyptic films often have complicated, long names. We decided to call our film Proliferation because it is short and snappy, but has an underlining meaning behind it. We also thought it might lead the audience into thinking, what does proliferation mean? And continue to watch the film to find out. After looking at Ender's Game, we saw that they had a title that popped up on the screen and stood out really well. We thought this was a really good idea because it drew our attention to the title. Therefore, we decided to do our title very similarly. We also found that many films, such as I Am Legend, have their title on a black background to emphasise the title. We wanted our title to jump out, so we had a white font on a black background and had it appear after 1 second. The camera angles we used were not necessarily stereotypical for a post-apocalyptic film. We didn't use any specifically because it was a convention. One shot we did use was the point of view shot from an item's perspective. We thought it was a really good shot that isn't used very often. We got our inspiration from this from Breaking Bad. They use it quite a lot and we thought it created a good effect. However, we did follow the conventions for our establishing shots. We used panning shots, which we know are commonly used in this genre of film. We know this because of the research we carried out beforehand. We saw these shots in many films such as I Am Legend and The Book of Eli. We think that using panning establishing shots are very informative for the audience, as they get to see where the scene is set and what kind of state the place is in. We thought it was important to show what kind of state the place was in, because the main aim of our film was to show the world in 2025 after an apocalypse of some sort. We also used a low-angle shot of the character to show how, even though she is a strong and dominant person individually, she is actually powerless in comparison to the rest of the world. It shows she has no strength compared to the pandemic that has just occurred, but we then continue to show the battle she fights every day just to survive. These shots are often used in this genre of film because the main purpose of the characters' lives in all of the films is to survive, and to survive you have to be powerful. However, when the character is facing danger through zombies, for example, they are less powerful and a high-angle shot is used. Also, in post-apocalyptic films, the individual shots at the beginning are usually long and the editing is slow, like in Elysium. And then the faster editing and short shots come in towards the middle when the action starts to happen. However, we decided that because we only had 2 minutes to make the opening look appealing and make the audience want to watch the rest of the film, we decided to begin slow but add in some action to make it interesting and finish with fast editing and short shots to signify the action and danger. The costume is one main way in which we used the conventions. We thought it was best to use the conventions for this part because the character would just look silly and unequipped without the correct costume. We took our inspiration from The Book of Eli for the costume because this costume was the easiest to remake ourselves. The character in The Book of Eli was wearing big padded clothing with a gas mask because the thing that was threatening him was airborne. We chose our costume to the best of our ability and in consideration to what we all owned. We decided a big coat would be relevant because this is actually worn in many of the post-apocalyptic films. Gloves also seem to be a convention. I think this is because many of the characters do not know what they are actually touching when the world is in the state that it is. We used this convention not only because the weather was cold, but because it was sensible and made sense for our film too. Big boots and wellies are a convention too, and are also worn in every one of the films we researched. This is because the characters do a lot of walking and running, and these shoes are the most suitable. The other parts of the costume that we used are the dust mask and the big army bag. We chose to use these because the disease is airborne and in many films they carried large bags. We think this is because the characters need to carry a lot of supplies just in case they run into danger. We got the inspiration for the mask from The Book of Eli again. The hair and makeup are obviously a convention of post-apocalyptic films because how the characters look play a huge part in establishing the genre of film. After watching The Walking Dead, I saw the girls are always wearing no makeup and have scruffy, unbrushed hair. This is because they do not have makeup or the supplies to do their hair and makeup. We saw this as a very important part of our opening because we only had 2 minutes to show our genre, and like I said, the way the characters look play a huge part in establishing the genre of film. The lighting was an easy thing for us to plan. All we did was use the artificial light in Jacob's garage because it was very small and dim. Although artificial light is not a convention of the genre, some films do in fact find some kind of generator like in The Walking Dead. This would be something we could explain later on in the film, if we were to continue with the story. The typical conventions for the lighting in this genre of film are dull and natural lighting. We did our best to find dull lighting by planning for rainy, cloudy weather. I think we managed to get the best weather we could for our film opening. I realised that many films use dull weather and lighting for their film when I watched World War Z. The weather outside is bright, to begin with, but gradually gets dimmer as bad things start to happen. This tells me that the bad weather and dark lighting signifies disaster or danger, and that bright lighting means everything is okay. This is why we decided to use the darker natural lighting and the dim artificial lighting. We thought it would help create the mood for the rest of our film and ensure it has a mysterious feeling. Right at the end, we decided to have the character turn around and look at the thing that she had just killed, while some natural sunlight was shining on her to show her innocence and that she still has a slight guilty conscience, despite how many people or things she has had to kill. So despite the fact that the weather did contradict our plans, it did end up working in our favour. The guilt is a common thing in the post-apocalyptic films, and the characters do have to fight their guilt, which is another topic we would expand on further in the film. The soundtracks and effects we used are typical conventions of the genre, especially the non-diegetic sounds. In every film we researched, such as Ender's Game, dark and eerie music was used to help create the mysterious aura we were aiming for. We used a drone to create our non-diegetic soundtrack, and we found it actually works very well because it is the same all the way through, and we just needed to make it louder at the tense moments. A drone is another convention of the genre. If it isn't a drone that is used, it is dark music which sounds similar and creates the same effect. Mostly, this kind of music is just used towards the start and fades out, but we kept ours going because we only created 2 minutes. We changed the volume of the drone at tense moments to help emphasise the tension and stress. This also happens in The Terminator and many other films. This is also a convention of not only our genre, but most films. A similar soundtrack is played in films like Children of Men and The Book of Eli. We added some sound effects too. We inserted some fire crackling on top of the noise we already had from our actual fire sounds. We thought this would emphasise the sound of the fire. We added this sound in on each shot that was set inside, and obviously sound effects are a convention of this film, and also every other genre of film. We used a news report playing over the top of our establishing shots.
So
This is
how
very
many people have been
stereotypical
given
for our
vaccine?
chosen genre,
Approximately,
and is included in almost every
625,000.
film. Children of Men is a perfect example for the use of news reports, as it uses one right at the start, like ours.
The world was stunned today by the death of Diego Ricardo, the youngest person.
We used ours especially to roughly explain what has happened in our film opening, seeing as we didn't have much time to explain any other way without being too boring. Throughout our opening, we used Adobe Premiere CS6 to change the colours of some shots. We needed to make the colours darker and less vibrant. This didn't take much time and effort because we managed to get the right weather and lighting while we were filming. The dark colours are typical in a post-apocalyptic film, as seen in The Book of Eli and Children of Men. We also thought that some shots needed some tinting done to make the colours stand out slightly less and make it look blander. During our research into other films of our chosen genre, we saw that the main characters were played by male actors. I Am Legend and The Book of Eli are perfect examples of this. The only piece of media that has a female perspective in it is the game The Last of Us. I think they use males because men are stereotypically the stronger gender and are more equipped to survive in tough conditions. We decided to go against this convention and use a female protagonist. We got this idea from the game The Last of Us, which is a game set in post-apocalyptic situations after a killer virus started to spread. The game begins from a little girl's point of view. The game then progresses as we see her as she grows into a strong individual and becomes able to survive. This is exactly what we wanted to portray. We wanted to show the audience that women can survive and they are capable if they are forced into that situation, just like the little girl in the game. Because we are doing this, it goes against most other post-apocalyptic films, and the audience, teens to young adults, will not be expecting to see a female main character. I think we portrayed this very well by showing the panic and fear she starts to feel when she sees that there is something or someone outside, but then contains those feelings and calmly walks towards the gun. A similar situation happens in The Last of Us when the little girl has to bottle up her fear and shoot the thing that is a threat to her. Also, no post-apocalyptic films that I researched had young characters, so we decided to challenge the conventions again and use a young girl who is in her mid to late teens and try to show how teenagers can step up and be responsible even though she has no choice but to do so. One convention that we used was the setting. From our research, we found that the typical setting for this genre is a run-down, messy and dirty place. For example, the prison in The Walking Dead. We came up with our idea after Toby and Jacob watched another homemade film opening. Unfortunately, we cannot remember the name of that opening. We used Jacob's garage as our setting. This is because Jacob's garage contains a lot of clutter and old items, which is what is typically found in the place in which characters live in other post-apocalyptic films. We also purposely used specific items such as the gun, battery-powered lamps, big bags and knives. We found these were common items in other films such as I Am Legend and the programme The Walking Dead. We felt following the conventions for the props and setting was very important for creating the right mood.